Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome to committee. It's one of my first times at Public Accounts in a while, but it's nice to see you again. I just want to we'll stay on the bank losses for a moment. I think, so 22-23, the loss is $3.1 billion. Is that correct?
So there's a little bit of a transposition. Our year end and Department of Finance's year end don't match up, but if you're looking at the public accounts number, that's the correct number. Yeah.
And the year prior, I don't have the number in front of me, but was there a loss recorded in the year prior?
Accounts? I'll maybe turn to my colleagues.
21, 22?
I have 22, 23 numbers with me.
You don't have them. Okay.
I don't think so.
That's okay. But it's, oh, sorry.
We had a surplus in the public accounts of $2.3 billion.
All right, so we went from a surplus in 21-22 to a loss in 22-23, and the expectation is for a loss again in this next year, correct? Okay. And my understanding is that the loss is actually very sensitive to the prevailing interest rates. That is, if the interest rate goes down, the losses will shrink. Is that correct? Okay. But if the interest rate stays where it is or goes up, the losses will grow, correct?
Correct. As you said,
Okay.
It's sensitive to interest rates. Yeah.
So, and the projection, the government's projections are that interest rates will actually go down. So the government is projecting its fiscal track or its fiscal health that interest rates will actually fall. But if interest rates just stay the same, that means the loss will actually be bigger than what the government projects. Is that correct?
I'm not able to speak for the government's projection. I'll maybe ask my colleagues to do that.
We have a limited ability to forecast Crown Corporation income into the future, but what you've described as the general relationship between interest rates holds.
Okay, but the Department of Finance does have a projection for losses of the bank going forward, does it not?
We do.
Okay. That projection was not shared in the budget. I'll note that the Bank of Canada losses were consolidated with the government's Canada Mortgage Bond Program. I'll ask the bank. That wasn't your choice that wasn't the bank's choice to consolidate that line item in the budget, correct? You weren't consulted on that?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay. So for the finance department, like negative $3 billion is a relatively material number. It would be very helpful for committee members and Parliament if we knew what the government projects these bank losses to be in the future. Is that something you could provide the committee?
It is. For the presentational purposes in the budget, as you say, we aggregate with other Crown corporations, but we're able to follow up in writing.
Okay, thank you very much. That would be very helpful. Now, part of the other reason there's losses is because the bank purchased government bonds, right? So this is a direct result of the quantitative easing activities that the bank undertook, correct, during COVID?
Correct.
Okay. Definitely look forward to the projections of the losses. If I may, I'll just switch gears a little bit and talk about M2 money supply. I saw a chart that's showing the Bank of Canada's balance sheet shrinking over time, which makes sense, right? Quantitative tightening. But I also have seen a chart showing M2 is actually growing. And I'm trying to understand why that's the case. If the bank is shrinking the balance sheet, how is the measure of M2 growing? Like, where's the money coming from?
So there's different definitions of the supply of money, and they measure different things. So M2 would largely grow or shrink according to demand for loans at banks. So M2, I think of M2 as the supply of money that's generated by commercial banks. So as there is an increase in demand for loans, banks can increase the supply of M2 by providing more loans. Those loans ultimately end up in savings accounts and other places around the economy. Generally, the demand for credit has been coming down, and the M2 numbers are relatively low over a historical perspective, so they are lower, but
Okay.
they would not. You wouldn't necessarily see those show up on our balance sheet.
Okay, thank you. Two quick follow-ups on that.
Yeah.
Is it possible that the government's borrowing activities, which are very substantial, not the rollover in debt per year, but the new funds required of $102 billion this year and $63 billion last year, are contributing to the growth of M2? That's a demand for credit?
Not directly, I guess
Okay.
indirectly.
So potentially indirectly. And then last question, Mr. Chair. It would be very helpful if the components of M2, is it something that you'd be able to share with the committee, the parts of M2 that are growing, that we might be able to kind of just understand, try to figure out where the money's
Sure,
coming
yeah,
from?
I think we can probably do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers.